Welcome back to Up to Something Outdoors. Today, we've got a 1978 Aristocraft. Classic. These boats were very, very popular in the day. They were like a higher end boat. Of course, that was back in the day. Today, she's here at the scrapyard. Let's take a quick look around. Good trailer, nice tires. Now this is the outdrive. Now in 1978, this is the drive we would expect to see. It's called the pre-alpha. That's the common nomenclature for it. I think technically Mercruiser called it the R or the MR drive, but everyone around here calls it the pre-alpha, okay? Easiest way to tell the pre-alpha from like an Alpha 1, this loop on the top. If you see this loop on the top cap, it's always going to be a pre-alpha. So here's what we got. These don't have a ton of value, but they have some. All right, let's take a quick look inside the boat. So Alrighty, inside the boat here, let's see if we got any extras. I see we got a ladder. Looks like 4 decent seats. Now these seats always fetch money here around here, even if they're slightly ripped. But these ones looking pretty good. People put them in their fishing boats or regular boats. Well, that one's got a little rip in it. Now they don't feel like they've got swivels on them, but at least they're there. That'll be some money. Big fire extinguisher, an anchor. That's all extra cash. Now while I'm in here, let me show you something here on the engine. Back in the day of the pre-alphas, these are 120s. Later on, they became 140 horse for these 4 cylinders. Now, very typically on these 70 boats, like this one is, used to have the gas tank right here. It was probably a steel tank. Less value for the scrapper like myself, but it's a whole lot easier to get out than the centerline tanks that we've seen in other videos. This one, previous owner cut it off, took it out for some reason. It's one less thing I have to do. Alrighty, so here we've got this outdrive, and this is the Mercruiser pre-alpha. That's what a lot of us call it. It's a very commonly used term. I think Mercruiser called it the R or MR. Anyways, this is going to be pre-1985. I believe this boat's late 70s. Comes apart very similarly to the Alpha 1, but let's take it apart and I'll show you a couple things on it. 9/16 for the trim cylinders, just like the Alpha 1s. The Alpha 1 Gen 1s. Gen 2s had a clip here instead of nuts and bolts. I find it easier to get these off first, especially when it's trimmed up as high as it is, like it is now. It'd be easier than trying to get these off afterwards. I'm going to pop these off. One side will come off easier than the other generally, but that's how life goes. Sometimes you can pull it all the way through, but like normally, this is what happens. It's most of the way through, but not quite all the way. And it becomes a bear. So, generally what works better, get it back in there a smidgen. Of course, go to show you something, and then it makes it more difficult. Sometimes you can just manhandle them. A lot of it, like I've said before, and other things is going to be, are you going to keep this to sell, or are you screwing around with it to take it into the scrap metal yard? Which is what this one's going to be. So then you just give it a little persuasion. Alright, so now that's off. Now we're going to need to take the main pieces, the 6 main bolts that hold the drive on. Those are 5/8. Get an extension, it helps out a good deal. Now I'm going to just spin all 6 of these off. Alrighty, I've said it in other videos, but I'm going to say it again. Make sure you get these washers off. If you leave them on, they don't look like they're going to do anything, but frequently they'll end up binding this up when you're trying to take it off, and you'll be tempted to say some choice words. Save yourself that headache and just take them off to begin with. Alrighty. Now that all of those are off, I find it easier to get a flathead screwdriver. And right here on both sides is a slight cutout. Just enough for a screwdriver to get in. Start it with the screwdriver, and then you can come back with the pry bar, or sometimes, if you're lucky, you can just wiggle and jiggle it and get it off. But a pry bar generally helps out. Shorter one would probably be a little easier for this tasking, but this one works. Now, when you're taking it off, there's this bar right here. It's a little bit of a trick to get your crowbar in on. It's only on that side, not on the other, on these old drives. And there it is. Pre-alpha drive, off the engine. Sometimes, some places you can sell these, some places you can't. In my market, I've not found it to be very successful to sell them. Who knows? So my landfill requires there to be no gas tanks in here. And in fact, they'll ban you from the landfill if there's a gas tank in a boat. This boat should have had the steel tank on the side of the engine. We looked at that already. But just to make sure that there's not any other tank, I'm going to drill a little hole just to see if I can find one. If my drill works. New batteries in order. The joys of Michigan in the fall. So cold out that the batteries don't last as long. I'm ready to try this. Take two. Nope, that battery don't want to work either. Alrighty. Well, I'll get another battery and try it again. Alrighty, got the new battery on. It is just foam underneath there. That's what I was hoping to see. Now I can show that there is not another gas tank buried in the center line. Because I don't want to get banned from the landfill. So, next thing to get this off, got the front footing. Front motor mount. This one's got square-headed lags on it. Very uncommon, but it's also classic 70s. So it takes a moment longer to get off unless you go get a much larger socket. But these generally are not super long lags, so shouldn't be too horrible. Then we'll move on to cables, battery cables, shift, throttle, the two big 3/4 inch bolts on the back holding it to the inner transom piece, and of course the exhaust manifold boot. That's actually slightly longer than typical. Normally that's what, about 3.5 inches. Normally they're 2.5 or 3. Let's spin them off. Nice thing about Mercury's is all their generations, from their pre-alphas, the alpha 1s, alpha 2s, not had Bravo yet. They're all very similar, all very easy to get apart. They come off very similarly. Some of the bigger engines have the motor mounts here, one on either side. These 4 cylinders, the straight 6s, all had them up here on the front. Super easy. Alright, next off I'm going to take those 2 bolts off in the back. Might have to go get another extension for this, because they're always buried back here and never easy to get to. But this one, they might have done me a solid and put them up somewhat close. Alrighty, so I'm trying to get that other big bolt out. That's the left side, or it would be the starboard side of the boat. Bolt. Now this wiring harness right here is in the way. That is the main wiring harness for the throttle and the engine. I see that it's held on by 4 little bolts. I'm going to see if I can get that out of the way first,
so that my ratchet can get onto the nut. Alright, one other thing on these old Merc Cruisers that sometimes happens is they've got a hook point here, but they don't on the rear side. I don't know why, but some of these old Merc Cruisers don't. You can wrap the chain around your exhaust bellows or exhaust manifold leg there. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it doesn't. So here we go. Alrighty, so that is that exhaust manifold boot. I took the pieces off of it, the clamps off of it, but I'm gonna actually have to cut it. It's still stuck on there just a bit too much. Alright, now that the exhaust bellow came off, it popped right off. And up we go. Alrighty. My assistant's gonna back the tractor up. Now that we got the engine out, all lopsided of course, but still, it's out. I like to look it over at this point, see if there's any visible cracks in the engine block area or the exhaust manifold. Now I already see this line here. Very troubling when you have a horizontal line on an engine right here, because this is where it always cracks. Rub your fingernail over it and it's catching a little bit there and there. So I'm going to say that's probably cracked. Cracked blocks, still worth something as parts, but a lot less than our non-cracked block. But when you hoist your engine out, now is a good time to look at it. It's a whole lot easier than when it's sitting down. Couple other interesting things on 60s and 70s boats. They had some really cool designs for like the bow lights. Even the 50s, well, the 50s even more so, but you don't get those very often. These are worth pulling off. I sell them about 20 bucks a piece to a local antique store. I've sold some on eBay before. They fetch about 20 bucks in this condition. Not amazing, but not horrible. If it was in pristine shape, I'd probably get about 50 bucks for this. Not too shabby. Also on boats of this age, they love to use aluminum for trim. Pretty much anywhere and everywhere you'll find aluminum trim. Even around the gauge cluster, right? It's not thick aluminum, it's not heavy aluminum, but at 50 to 53 cents a pound, why not? On this boat, it'll probably be an extra about 5 bucks of aluminum for a couple minutes of work to pull off.